I'd like to call to order the July 9th, 2019 meeting of the Utilities Committee. Madam Secretary, let the all members of this committee are present this evening. If everyone would please rise for the invocation to be given tonight by Councilman Oliver Joseph and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Lord, bow our head. Dear Lord, bless this great parish, this great state. Dear Lord, bless all the members here to make the right decision on utilities for this community. And dear Lord, bless all the armed forces service members that give us the right and the freedom we have today. Dear Lord, bless everyone. Amen. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Wow, looking across the audience this evening, I thought maybe we were giving away S&H grain stamps, but welcome everyone. I'm sure you're all here for various reasons.
How many people know what that is?
Showed my age, Councilman Dawson. I'm not going to explain, but S&H green stamps, there we go. I think there was another one called Top Value.
Yeah. Top value too.
There are no chairs, item number 3, chairs addition this afternoon. We will have a public comment period if necessary. Anyone wanting to avail themselves to that, please come up and fill out a red or green card, and you'll be given 3 minutes when the time comes on any issue on our agenda tonight to which you wish to speak. Item number 5 is approval of our minutes from the last meeting. Entertain a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Been moved by Councilman Benny Johnson, second by Councilman Aaron Lawler to accept those minutes. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, those minutes have been adopted. Item number 6 is our director's report. Tonight, we're going to have Mr. Daniel come up and give us a, discuss the cost increase from Assumption Parish as well as the intake water supply issue. Mr. Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me apologize because the packet on your computers is probably a little jumbled. Our administrative assistant, who used to do all this, she quit, and Jenny replaced her, and she just didn't do as good a job.
Now, look, it's okay to pick on me, but not Jenny.
Painful.
No, Jenny saved the day. She got everything together. It may not all be on the computer properly, but you have a packet with all the information in it, so we ought to be able to proceed with your packet. Are you going to, are those things? Okay, you passed them out, okay. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was Assumption Waterworks District Number 1, who we buy water from. ACUD number 1 buys water from. They're going up 2.48% on the cost. I don't plan on making any adjustments to the price of ACUD number 1. Hopefully in the not too distant future, we're going to be supplying all that water from PUA anyway. So unless anybody has just an objection, I would just prefer to leave the rates alone. We just on May 16th, we just made all the rates for PUA and ACUD number 1 exactly the same. So ACUD number 1 also pays that parcel fee. So it actually, even though the rates are the same, they still pay more money. I don't see any reason to raise the prices.
Well, I mean,
So, Mr. Daniel, this is nothing more than a CPI bump that Assumptions maybe has in one of their ordinances or something?
It is.
So we can expect to see this again a year from now?
I'm not sure what their ordinance exactly says. I'm going to try to find that out. But it looks, they obviously have the ability to 75% of the CPI.
I got you. Mr. Dawson?
no, that
That was your
clarified it. Thanks.
Mr. Lawler, you?
And
Mr. Joseph?
yeah, that's contract has probably been renewed maybe about 10 years ago when that happened. 10 years ago. And,
So
but-
it hadn't gone up much in 10 years?
No, not every year, no. This is, I haven't seen a increase within, I don't know how long, so, from the value, because originally, we started out as, I guess we've been in contract with them, Glenn, I guess about close to 20 years now, and it started off at $1.80. And so, I mean, over the 20 years, I haven't seen, like I said, I haven't seen an increase from them in, I guess, in 5 years. So, plus ACUD 1 was not in the red. So I was hoping, yeah, I agree with you, we need to go with it. And hopefully, when we make this upgrade with PUA, that will solve that problem across the board.
Yes.
So.
And we will not, like I said, in the not too distant future, and Glenn, GSA is here to update the progress with USDA. We'll be manufacturing all of the water for ACU number 1 from the PUA plant. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, and I think I briefly mentioned it last time, was the Lafourche Freshwater District is building a huge intake structure in Donaldsonville. It's going to be great for all of the parishes south of Ascension. It doesn't do a lot for Ascension, but it just happens that our intake structure is right in the middle of where they're building their big intake structure. So we're going to have to move it. We've looked at a number of possibilities. Some of them are not possible, like having our own line out in the Mississippi River, to building something with them. The latest iteration of this process has us trying to just move it over not too far for a very minimal amount of money. And then we've looked at also it costing up to $1 million to move it. So, yeah, it might be, it might not be the best thing for the water district, but for PUA. But we're hopeful, and we're having it surveyed now. We're hopeful that we can just move it a short distance at a minimal cost, and basically stay pretty much where we are.
What is a minimal cost?
Well, I'm not sure. We're working. We had a meeting with the Freshwater District, and they're trying to work with us on this. The contract that was signed on this with the district dates back to 1962. It was signed by People's Water Company. It's very clear that if they do any work, we have to move our intake structure at our own expense, our intake line at our own expense. So there's no wiggle room in the language. But again, we are working with the district to try and do it as minimally cost as possible.
Okay, so, Mr. Daniels, so legal has examined what, okay. So-
Yes, sir.
And they've concluded that it would be on us if we have to move. In the graphic, not available to the public at home, I see you've got something written there in green. Apparently there are 2 potential intakes that have been unused, but built back, is that 1923?
Right. There's some really old lines in here. We were just identifying them.
And you've got condition unknown, so, I mean, we
Right.
don't know anything about that right now.
Correct. And we're also told that putting a line out in the Mississippi River is really not an option. It's very expensive. It's impossible to get permitted, and then you get hit by a barge. They can't miss a bridge. You know? I don't have a lot of hope for them missing our line.
Wouldn't that line be submerged, sir?
Well,
Sufficiently to
it-
not hit by a tugboat
I'm
captain?
not sure. I think under the circumstances.
Or is it
of-
tethered
of-
maybe to a buoy or
I
something?
think drawing the water in, it can't be too deep. but maybe
gotcha.
maybe Mr. Shaheen can opine on
Memphis,
how that would work, but, it's almost impossibility to be able to do that.
So you're going to come back to us
That's
with this
my
issue, is
understanding. Might
that?
be wrong.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Lawler?
What is the time period that we're looking at on this?
Well, they say they're going to go out to bid in the first part of 2020.
So, I mean, what is going out to bid, but when will construction, so when do we have to have this done by?
I would say we have to have our, where we're going to put that line figured out by the first part of 2020.
Okay, wow.
Mr. Dawson?
Maybe you answered this somewhat, but I'm wondering, is there any science involved in where that line is located, like different strata in the river? I know that the river has a lot of contaminants in it.
Well-
Normally, these heavier ones obviously are towards the bottom. I don't know whether there's any science in that or not.
I'm sure it can't be close to the bottom. I'm relatively sure
Yeah.
about that. How far off the surface it has to be, I'm not 100% sure. This is,
Well, I'm just wondering, like in treatability, whether that could affect the treatability in any way if you at different strata in the river, or whether there's that much difference
you know,
there.
what my understanding is, and it's, I assure you it's limited. The biggest problem is bringing in all the solids in the river. So that's one of the advantages of the freshwater district is, it takes that, puts it in a relatively,
Yeah.
not, the solids drop out, it's not moving as, like the
That's
river.
settlement pond.
They settle out a little bit, but still, we would have a solids issue, but just not as bad as the river, so. But again, maybe,
Well, I mean, I guess all I'm saying
like to
is
come up and
that
talk about it, Glenn?
we're gonna have one
Because,
opportunity to do this, and if there's some science there, we should look at it.
We're definitely looking at it. Owen and White are on top of this deal, and again, we're just trying to do it at the most cost-effective way possible.
I'm assuming we're speaking about the water intake structure?
Yeah,
I didn't want to opine on something else.
well, that's never stopped you before.
Well, I know, but I want to stay on point. I didn't want Doc to kick me out. No, the water intake structure, Bill, it's located in the river for a couple reasons. One, because of a few reasons. River traffic, constant damage from barges. They moor barges on that river batcher. That's one issue. The second issue is, of course, there are times when there are chemical spills and other things that occur in the river that require these intake structures to be shut down. And of course, with the freshwater district's control facility right there, it's easy to shut that intake structure down by shutting that control structure down. The third part of it is you were mentioning science about the location of the intake, and there is. When you're in that river, there are certain stratas, a certain strata you want to be in. You don't want to be at the top, you don't want to be at the bottom. And as William just explained, there are situations with the silt that you take in. Of course, the more silt you take in, the more you got to get rid of it at your plant. And so in the Bayou installation, which was installed by Peoples many years ago, which we're proposing to reinstall in the bayou, there's a stilling chamber that allows the silt to, most of the silt,
Settlement chamber.
to settle out rather than taking it into your intake structure and dealing with it at your plant.
It's like a clarifier.
Yeah, so that's the science behind it, and that's why we think it's important to leave it in the bayou where it's at. And I think William is working out something with the freshwater district to get that resolved.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson?
William, would you, are you considering working with them to kind of co-op what they're doing, be the best option for us, the most cheapest, or is it something else?
No, obviously, they're going to be doing a tremendous amount of construction work. And some of that construction work sort of overlaps with work that we would be doing. So if we can work with them to do it, to get it done, we're even asking them to help us out a little bit on the cost and since they're there doing the work, we're just asking them to do some of the work that we would be doing as well. And I have to say that they have been very amenable and open to that. But we need to figure out exactly how we're going to do this. Now, time is of the essence under their, in their minds, because they have to have their plans complete. And then I think they've got all their permits and everything, and they want to go out to bid as soon as possible, so they're in a hurry to help us figure this out as well.
Seems like it would be easier for us to, take a slipstream off of what they got or something in.
We looked at a number of
Large.
different options, Councilman, and in fact, early on in the process, they were even talking about building a bay for us. The problem would be access. I mean, if we had a bay, we had our pumps in it, we needed to do something, we really didn't figure out how we could just have 24-hour-a-day access to it at all times and, moving their equipment and everything to work on our pumps. So we kind of pulled back from that. We looked at moving it around different places. We now think that based on their design, we can move it just a very short distance and utilize a significant portion of the line that's already in place. And that's what we're trying to do now.
Thank you.
So again, William, those two lines we talked about from 23, they just capped right now? I mean, they're in place, but somewhere in there, they go all the way into the river?
Well,
or-
we're not 100% sure. We know that there's some old lines out there. We even have right-of-way to one.
Okay.
Still, our servitude to one still in place. So, but I think that it got turned into a sludge line where they would pump their sludge from the plant into the river. So it was no longer, it hasn't been used as an intake line in, I don't even, many years.
But we wouldn't have permit problems with, if, let's say we were to use those with this issue that Mr. Cheyenne brought up about strata, not using the top, not using the bottom. He didn't say where. I mean, today we keep hearing about opening the spillway, which has caused these massive algae blooms in Lake Pontchartrain and elsewhere and killed off 85% of the oysters and 25% of the crabbing and so forth, although I understand that's a salinity problem. There's a lot of nastiness coming down from industrial plants north of us and fertilizers and so forth in the water of the Mississippi River.
That's why we clean it and disinfect it.
Correct.
At the plant. My understanding is.
And of course, when they close the spillway, a lot of that won't stop, but it'll be lessened to a great deal. At least dumping it into the lake will be stopped. It's still going to be in the Mississippi River.
So we haven't used it as a intake line. We would have to go back through and re-permit it. What the experts are telling me is that permit is pretty much impossible to get.
Ooh.
So it's better, I think it's better for many reasons to keep it in the freshwater districts bayou for the reasons Glenn mentioned. So that's where we're trying, that's the
But the
goal
federal
we're-
government couldn't or wouldn't shut us down from using the Mississippi River as a source of water, right? I mean,
Sir, I didn't understand.
the federal government couldn't or shouldn't or wouldn't shut us down. I mean, make us sink a well, for example, or something, and not use the Mississippi River as a source of.
No, and we get our water out of the freshwater district, so they let the water into the bayou that they control.
They were getting it from.
And although we're getting it from the Mississippi River, it goes into the structure that they maintain. And then like Glenn said, if there's a spill or something in the river, they close the intake structure and we still have the good water there in the bayou, so.
Okay, I got you. Any other questions, Mr. Joseph?
Doesn't affect ACU number 1, sir.
Preemptive answer.
It might if you don't have water.
No, it don't. At the current time, it don't. But
This committee has entirely.
I guess, Glenn, I mean, I'm looking at that map. I mean, that ship is still at the bottom of the Mississippi River. The ship might be right on top of that line, correct? Well, the temporary, if you don't go into the Mississippi River. I mean, but, I hope y'all stay in Bayou Lafourche.
Hang
We're
on,
not,
come
we
up
don't
on
want to
mic.
go to the Mississippi River.
All right, that, I mean.
We
that
have,
is-
Mississippi River is really an option. We considered it for a nanosecond, and
All
then we
right, you
moved
should have took
on.
them off that map then.
Well, I want to give you all the information, Councilman. Because if I hadn't have put it on there, you'd have, it would have been a conspiracy.
All the
Without a cost-benefit analysis?
Yes, sir.
all the options and considerations that y'all have mentioned, we've looked at, or have been looked at. Best option is what was been proposed and is being proposed, and that is to stay in Bayou Lafourche at or near the current location of our water intake structure. And as William has explained, Freshwater District is working with the parish utilities to identify a location. May even be some cost sharing in the construction of some of that. Then they're not gonna put our equipment in, they're not gonna put our control equipment and SCADA and chemical feed systems. That are gonna be our responsibility to do. But they may be willing to assist with the construction of the structural components of that water intake structure. We haven't gotten that, that's the
We
direction we're
had
heading in.
it, we had it surveyed to see exactly where it was so that they could overlay it on their plans, and that's kind of where we are now.
Mr. Daniel, we do pay Bayou Lafourche
We do pay, yes, sir.
for the water that come out that.
We actually have one of the better contracts with them. We only pay for the water we actually sell. Some of them pay for the water they take out.
Yeah.
And we take out a lot more water than we sell, as you can see from those water audit reports. So we have a very good contract with them, although they would like to redo all the contracts and have every single contract with every single parish exactly the same, and that's what they're going to be doing in the future.
How long our contract is for?
Sir?
How long is our contract with them?
I think our contract is technically month to month now.
Ooh.
Okay.
It's been in place since 1962.
I mean, from a permit standpoint of view, I mean, if you had to do something else, ain't no way you're gonna get a permit by first part of next year, right?
That's correct.
Any more questions for Mr. Daniel?
No.
Okay, moving right along. Number 7 is the Parish Utilities of Ascension Water Quality Update Report by TMB with the executive assistant change of guard. There's no name in that from Thornton, Musso, and Bellarmine. So, sir, when you come, just introduce yourself. And
He knows who he is.
we kind of know him. The public at home may not know him.
It's the stuff that I had emailed y'all earlier.
I don't
today.
trust what she gives us anymore.
Understand. How y'all doing? My name is Chris Johnson. I work with Thornton, Musso, and Bellman.
I don't know what that is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, the first page is simply a summary, but we're going to go into a little more detail. If we look at the first thing mentioned, it's ATP monitoring. I do this every month, or every quarter, and it's just a measure of biological activity. I measure about 16 sites in the distribution. If we go to page 3, you'll have a better idea about what we're looking at. Now, if you look at just the average on page 1, 4.37, it's actually higher than what it normally is. But that's really only because there were there were really about 4 sites that tested a lot higher. Almost every other one was in a really great range, almost a range that you would see coming out of the plant itself. But we could talk about these few little spots where, in my opinion, we found nitrification at Lehmanville Park and Caesar. Now, those areas are end of the line cutoff areas. Normally, when I arrive there, they're actually flushing constantly. The time where I had gone to do these particular tests, they actually weren't flushing at the moment. So I don't know if that was just that just happened to happen that day or not, but it could play into these numbers. So if you look, the nitrite is a real key indicator of nitrification. The top end level of acceptable nitrite is 0.015. And as you can see, Lehmanville Park blew that right out of the water, along with Caesar, pretty much almost double. It wasn't great, but if you really look at an overall system, I wouldn't necessarily recommend a free chlorine burn, though I think it could be beneficial. You don't have to do it from these numbers. What needs to be done, and what I had mentioned when I had sent this report initially, which I think was on June 11th, flushing needs to be enacted regularly if it isn't already going on, which I know it is because I talk to them often, but it is something to consider. Overall, though, it looks pretty good, I would say, other than those two areas, Caesar and Lehmanville Park. Moving on, if we go back to the first page, we can look at disinfection byproducts. This is probably the most glaring issue as far as water quality goes. If you turn to page 2, you can look, the items in yellow, they have 5 actually in yellow. I actually missed one. So 6 out of the 8 sample events were above the MCL. It doesn't mean that you were in violation of anything according to EPA, because that compliance is actually based on the running annual average, which, as you can see, so the running annual average is in the green. Go to the second page, and you see the items in yellow. So just to be clear, up on the top set.
Go to this packet, the other package you got,
Oh, sorry.
in the wrong
That
package.
one, yeah.
Go with that package. Under the bus package, not under the bus package, that package.
So if you look in the middle of the page, there's one item that is highlighted. There should be another item that's highlighted on that the second of 19 is the 81.8. The MCL for THMs or trihalomethane is 80 parts per billion. It was over in this quarter at Modeste and Garrison Turnaround. And if you look at the haloacetic acids right below, all 4 sites tested above the MCL. Now, as I was saying, really all that matters is the RAA, okay? So the running annual average are below all MCLs. Otherwise, you would have had to have gone public notice by this point. Now, the next disinfection byproducts being taken are going to be taken in September in the third quarter. And what affects disinfection byproducts the most is the heat, right? It really brings them up, it increases, and I'm sure that September will be hot. These particular numbers that I had seen in the last third quarter are actually really good for September, or they're decent anyway. It's not going to take. It's going to take a lot. I'm not going to lie. It will take a lot for you to actually bust the running annual average, but there are options, and there, as we have said before, if you use chlorine dioxide in these situations, it can reduce your chlorine usage at the plant, which causes THMs and HA5s. Chlorine dioxide produces none of that. So you can reduce your chlorine, therefore reduce disinfection byproducts. As well, chlorine dioxide, or the ion chlorite, has been shown to minimize nitrification throughout distribution systems. So it is something to consider. It's something to consider. Moving on, though. If you go back,
What's the limit for the running average?
okay, so for the THMs, it is 80 parts per billion, and for the HA5s, it's 60. So as you can see,
We're close to that.
y'all are close, right?
Well, on the ACUD side, come on in. On the ACUD side, you're getting water from Assumption Parish, and those numbers are high coming in. I mean, that Jewel site is basically the point of entry into your system, so you don't really have any control over that, other than flush. And I think William's point earlier about, at some point in the future, PUA being able to provide water to ACUD will help remedy that situation.
Well, if I look at these numbers, I don't see, I mean, the Jewel site is actually lower than the other three for the AJA 5.
Yes, they are. I mean, and these vary. They really do.
Well, but that's actually, the Jewel site is coming into your system, so you gotta go all the way to
Modest.
Well, I know, but I thought you said this is what was coming from Assumption.
Yes.
It is. The two on the left, Modest and Jules, are ACUD. The two on the right are Evangeline and Garrison Turnaround. Those are PUA. So, I mean, yeah.
I'm just saying it does, I
it's marginally
understand what you're saying, but if it's coming from Assumption, then this number should be higher. If you're saying the problem is from Assumption,
Well, I'm just saying the water coming from Assumption, coming into your system, the number is high. You can't reduce it anymore. All it can do is stay the same or go up. You follow me?
well, no, I understand we cannot affect it, but what I'm saying is that it's not any higher than the rest of the system.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
So I have a question. Backing up a little bit, in the beginning of your report to the L Park, was that Lehmanville Park?
Yeah.
And CESA, where we talked about the two measures of nitrification,
Yep.
albeit they're a little out of whack. You don't recommend a chlorine burn. But we look over to the left, though, at those two components, Lehmanville Park and CESA, and look at the chlorine and the monochlorine.
Right.
Both of the levels compared to the ranges given at those two sites for those two parameters are substantially lower than where you need to be. So you're not recommending chlorine because just trying to fix those two, when I look at all the rest of these sites, like, I don't know, Lee, Jules, some of these other ones like St. James, Folsom, so they're very, very high in chlorine and monochlorine. So if we did a chlorine burn, it would push them over the top maybe, or?
No, a chlorine burn is different. It's a different chemistry. You would be using free chlorine as opposed to total chlorine. You would still be going out of the plant at about a 4, maybe a little less, probably about like a 3.9 or something. But that would be free chlorine as opposed to total chlorine or monochloramine. Monochloramine wouldn't be in it at all. Monochloramine denotes that you're feeding ammonia as well as chlorine at the plant.
Okay.
So you would turn off the ammonia, and then it would feed a free chlorine, which is a lot stronger of a disinfectant. Y'all have had one before, probably about 3 years ago or
I
something.
remember it.
Yeah, and it makes sense that these numbers are like they are. I would say you can change this potentially by flushing continually.
You
And
flush it
then-
aggressively, because, I mean, if you look at your numbers are pretty good, except for that one section at Lehmanville and Garrison. But, it would take, you may have to work to start up above that and flush and bring the water, down to where you can get maybe 1.5 to 2 ppm on those sites. And if you do that, you would see these numbers drop down.
So have you recommended this aggressive flushing to Mr. Daniels?
all the time.
Yeah.
It's, right now, it has been so hot, it's hard to
Okay.
keep the food industry like
I got it. Okay, other questions?
Well, can I get one more, just to
Yeah, well,
educate me?
Go,
let's do round one first, and we'll come back to Bill. Go ahead, OJ.
I know at the Poly out the water tower, we do have a chlorine booster filter in it. We've been using it, or?
You'll have to great effect, actually. And if you want to look on the last page, these show the results of that booster, and it's really quite staggering, to be honest, because when we first kind of started looking at it, Bro Road
Yeah.
was getting nothing. I mean, they're far down, as I guess
10
y'all
mile,
know.
12 miles down the
Right,
road.
yeah. They were getting nothing. They were lucky to get any residual at all. Now they got a 2, which is really great. And then also, I mean, if you look at the ATP, the biological activity is really low. There's no indication of nitrification. So,
I mean, when the emergency rule came into effect, they said you had to get your chlorine up to 0.5, which, 0.5 means, I guess, you're legal. But having done this is, over the years and as many sites that we've tested, 0.5, if you stay at 0.5 all the time, you're not going to see good ATP numbers, good nitrite numbers. I mean, you need to be on up 1.5 or 2 if you can, because the whole purpose of this nitrification plan was the amoeba. And, fortunately, you guys were tested, I think, 2 or 3 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you've been good, I don't think they tested this year, but Bro Road was, a concern for a long time until we got that booster station up and running, because prior to that, all we could really do was flush.
And currently they are flush too, right now.
Well, you and everybody else.
everybody,
I mean,
yeah, it's.
I mean, I understand because of the heat. I mean, I do understand that. Summertime is totally different, but they've been flush.
Yeah.
So, I do know that. I'm getting too many phone calls up there, but the public need to understand. The only reason we're flushing because we don't want to send out them THM and letters.
That's
And
right.
once you do that, once that get there, I mean, that letter got to go out and then everybody start panicking. And
Also, the total
I'd rather lose
chlorine,
the water than to have that letter go out.
yeah, and the total chlorine degrades if you don't flush.
Right.
That's the other thing too. So, it's just a common thing that all systems have to deal with, if you're using monochloramines, which
All right.
nearly everybody.
So we
does.
are, and that's all, I just want to make sure when we get our water from Assumption, we are adding something to
We are,
You are.
it,
Yeah.
to maintain it. Just the flushing process is what really.
yeah,
Okay.
adding to
For
the
me.
top.
Councilman Dawson.
So just kind of help educate me on this Shake Snyder. So it shows ATP is up, and then also all your, disinfectant products are not down. Let me ask that.
Right.
Is that unusual?
It's not very unusual. The ATP test is very sensitive. Dependent upon how long I flushed, and dependent upon what is in that line right there. I mean, I say the 5 is a goal for quality control. The actual company that creates the test recommends remediation at 10 picograms per milliliter. And so 6.46, it's not great. It should maybe perhaps raise a flag for you to look at the other parameters. But when you look at the other parameters, it's got a 3.81, it's got a 0.09 nitrite. Everything looks good. So I wouldn't worry so much about it, about that particular site. The sites that I would worry about, if I were any to worry at all, would be the Leamyville Park
Yeah.
and the Caesar. Same for the 70 Tower. Towers also, they have more bacterial growth.
I mean, are all of these just quality? I mean, not,
They
they're not
are.
they're not
Right.
regulatory, is that
The
correct?
only
right.
thing on that
Yeah.
page is
Chlorine.
chlorine. And these are, I mean, we basically, it's self-imposed. We come up with the plan, they approve it, and not everybody will have the same, target levels or the maximum levels that you may have. I mean,
But if you measure that, you have to record it and you have to maintain that data, is that
Right.
correct?
Correct. That's right. As far as the other things that are significant, if you go back to the first page, the corrosion rates are continuing to be good. Y'all are using a zinc orthophosphate. They continue to do well. And then the only other thing is TOC removal. And actually, y'all are 2 out of the 3 months of this quarter, y'all did fairly well on that with a high TOC removal ratio. You need to be above a 1. And y'all's running annual average currently is a 1.53, which is good. And just to reiterate, I know I've said it before, but TOC is a precursor to THMs and HA5s. So you really do you want to keep them at bay as best as possible. So, but y'all are doing a fair job at that. Other than that, do y'all have any more questions?
Okay, hearing none, we'll move along to,
Thank you.
and thank you, gentlemen.
Sure, thank y'all.
Item number 8 is Ascension Sewer LLC update. BCP, Bernard Capital Partners. I assume Mr. Bodier is going to give that report, Mr. Daniel, or?
Yes, I thought it would be a good idea to provide the committee with a brief update on the status of the sewer project. The plan is under development. I'm very pleased with the progress that we've made to date. And so I wanted to invite Mr. Bodier from Bernhard Capital Partners up here so that he could go into a little more detail.
Yeah, excellent, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you, William. Mr. Chairman and council members, thank you for the chance to come speak to you tonight to update you on what we've been working on for really the past 5 weeks since we presented to the committee in late May. I can tell you that the time has gone by very quickly since then, and the team has been working extremely hard on putting together this final plan to present to you. We're still on track to present to you in August on a final plan, as well as provide to you in advance of that the commercial structures and proposals for the contracts for the long-term operation of the system, so that you will have those available to begin making your determination. Most importantly, the team has come together very well. And when I talk about the team, we have a very tight group comprised of GSA, Hartman, AWT, and BCP. Just to give you like a good example of how we've been able to get great efficiency by having brought these people together. AWT and Hartman have done a great deal of work to update the customer counts. They know how many customers are both existing on the system, how many customers have come on since 2015, and have done estimates for things like, as you can imagine, vacant land as to what the potential for customers are there. They've been able to feed that information to GSA, and GSA is updating its models on the system to determine things like flow rates and help design the collection system. We also have Hartman being able to do parallel modeling on its own system, so we can look at multiple technologies, multiple options. As you can imagine, as we think about going to a centralized treatment plant, all of these areas of the parish have to feed into that treatment plant. So you need to determine things like where is the right connection point and what will be going into the system and what the flows will be at those times. So it's a great effort to refine the model, to both not only take that flow model and update the cost characteristics compared to what may have been done in previous efforts. We've done things like bring some of the leading plant constructors in and talk to them about different approaches to constructing the plant and different things that can affect the cost of the plant. Another example to give you, you could pretty much look at a typical plant technology and determine with a pretty good estimate what it will cost to build that plant. What you don't know is necessarily how geotechnical could impact the design of that plant from a standpoint of whether you drive pilings, whether you build above or below. And so those are the things that, now that we have a good idea about the site location we want for the plant, we'll be able to start to refine those things. But those are all gonna take further time, but we're making great progress along those. And again, we're still on track to present to you finally in August. I can tell you that what we continue to see is that we believe that this plan is gonna still be pretty consistent with what we presented to you preliminarily in May. We're not seeing anything that causes us to dramatically veer off of what we thought then, although we're getting a little tighter on the numbers. We keep three things in the forefront of our mind every single time that we meet again to consider the design, and that is number one, the coverage area. We want to cover as much of the population as possible. We want to cover as many of the subdivisions as possible, including particularly schools and businesses that are the most impacted in many ways, by the current system. Secondly, we focus on what will have the greatest impact of reducing effluent to Biomanchac. So we want to create the biggest impact there to avoid a potential compliance situation for the future. And then thirdly, which is not thirdly in importance, is rates. We told you that we've set a target rate to be competitive, competitive with Baton Rouge, not in lower or certainly equal to Baton Rouge, and we're going to design a system that addresses that need. But with all those things being given, we're not going to try to lock you into a particular plan without taking your feedback and the public's feedback and responding to it. So we're creating a system that will be able to integrate feedback and iterate back and forth as to what the best plan is that everybody wants to adopt given the parameters. We have had many meetings both with stakeholder groups, public groups, and individual stakeholders in the parish since May. I can tell you that I think, this week's probably a slow week, and we've had 2 meetings this week. And that includes people like the clerk of court, the assessor. It's been surprising to me as to how many people want to know what's going on and be informed so that as they get questions, they feel like they can respond to them in a reasonably intelligent way. But, the Home Builders Association, the chambers, just about every group that you can imagine having a stake in this project has asked us to come present, and I think our presentations have been received very well. Spending a lot of time with William Daniel.
It'll get better, don't worry, it'll get much better.
No, but it's been, I guess the best way to say it is I now know 3 different ways to get between Baton Rouge and Ascension Parish, depending on what's going on in the traffic, so at least I've figured that much out. As I mentioned to you, we are very far along in the drafts of the contracts that we will be able to deliver to your lawyers within not a matter of weeks, a matter of days, to begin that assessment. And we have put our own contracts in place for both the teaming and for the future of the transfer of the assets to the parish. So all those things, as I mentioned, are going very well, and I think we are hitting the targets that we expected. We said this was going to be a public process. We said that we want to get the input from the public, and That's still a piece of the puzzle that, that we want to take into assessment of our final plan. So to that end, we have scheduled a public open house. I would ask if you could possibly put up this invitation we've prepared. We're going to be posting it on our website. It's July 23rd. It's at the Clarion from 4 to 6. We are trying to get the word out in as many ways as possible to invite the public to come. We will have materials boards presented. We'll have our full team there, including all the engineers, as well as the BCP team to answer any questions, to take any feedback that the public has to offer. And we obviously want that to be a meaningful exercise. So we want to take that feedback and have the ability to adjust the final plan based upon what we hear from the public. We would ask that through any of the avenues you have, that you invite, your constituents to come and attend that event on the 23rd. And so, I could tell you this. We think about this system, and we might say phase 1, or we might talk about coverage area. We are planning to present to you a system that will be prepared to grow with and serve the parish, not for 10 years, but for 50 years. And I think as I hear questions and I try to field questions, one of the things I continually try to get people focused on is that you have to think that this is a full parish effort. And so it will take us several years to get through the phases, but the intention is to include everyone. And so that's the challenge to both building this system. I think you guys had a presentation earlier tonight that talked about growth rates. That is one example of what we're trying to figure into our modeling. What is both the proper growth rate to assume that we can build to the capacity of that, but not overbuild, or not overbuild too early or unreasonably. And so whether or not you have 800 new home starts and 150 new business starts, or you have some other number, we're trying to get that as close as we can to project into our model. And so you can understand the challenges, but it's something we're familiar with, and it's just part of how we it's a common component of utility business, but we just got to make sure we're gathering all the right information, because the past, from a standpoint of growth, the past is not always a great predictor of the future. And there are a lot of things that can impact that. Even things like the fill ordinance, we think is having an impact on home starts. So, we try to think, what are the types of things that could impact or maybe slow down some of those rates of growth. So, probably more detail than you need, but what we're trying to give you a sense of is we are on track. We will start to share with the public more of our vision for the full plan beginning on July 23rd, and are available to answer any questions that you and anyone have, and are doing the best we can as fast as possible, but to do as comprehensive a job as possible in putting together a plan we'll present to you in August.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bodie. I have a few comments, and we'll turn it over to the committee for discussion from the chair. First of all, I want to thank you for, you didn't mention, but I see you guys now are advertising the Ascension Sewer LLC Consortium through media. And by the way, the one I'm referring to is an excellent, very professional advertisement. And that's coupled with this July 23rd open house that you're talking about to be held at the Clarion. Obviously, I would encourage your group to invite the public in as soon as possible, and it seems like that's what you intend to do. So a couple questions of something that you did, a few things you did not mention. Are we still pretty much on track? What are we hearing these days about the SRF loan from the state, as well as the folks at DEQ happy? At our last meeting, it was the intention of Mr. Daniel and I to actually sit down and meet with Mr. Brown and Dr. Brown and quiz him about a few things, but unfortunately he had an illness and that didn't happen. So and y'all's various deliberations, and Mr. Daniel, you're welcome to comment as well. Thank you for coming up. What's going on with the SRF loan and the DEQ?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We have met with Dr. Brown. He is thrilled at our program, and he told us that the SRF loan would remain available to us, but he did make sure that we understand that it's not going to be available forever, and he would like to see us move forward on this program so that he can give us the money.
Okay, thank you. And then my second questions involve the, what I call the first step, the CEA that was executed in May with the second one forthcoming, hopefully in August. Are we still in the deliberations that have been happening behind the scenes, targeting, was it 16,000 customers, and reducing the millions of gallons per day being currently placed into or impaired by UManchac by 2 million GPD?
Yeah, I would definitely still within that range. The numbers being refined, but like I said, we haven't seen anything yet that's dramatically changed our counts in that regard.
Right, and I want the public that's maybe watching at home, because I do get a lot on my social media page, to please understand that this is a situation, that this first step that's dealing exclusively with people who are already pretty much on packaged plant systems, who are paying a monthly sewer bill as it is to AWT. And as you've indicated, I won't elaborate unless you want to any further, hopefully there won't be any major rate changes. What I see in the advertisement and what was agreed upon is that those rates would be competitive and reasonable. And I'm sure this council is going to do everything in their power to hold your feet to the fire on that. So with that, I will turn it over and thank you for the in-depth update and presentation. Mr. Dawson.
Thank you, Jeff. I really don't have that, just one real question. I wanted you to reiterate for us that the funding here is going to be through, in your proposal, going to be through rates only. There's not going to be any additional funding scheduled to come from the parish's general fund or from tax revenues. And that funding, I know you said 50 years, I like to think about it as, that the replacement costs are built in, so you'd have this be longer than 50 years. We're going to need sewer here. So,
Well, that's right.
I wanted to see if you agree with this, that what y'all are saying is the funding's going to be through rates only, no additional taxes and no funding from our current budget. And that, will include in that replacement cost for the equipment.
What we're doing is we're obviously, another component of what we've been doing is finalizing our due diligence into the financials of both AWT and to the parish system. So we're still trying to fully understand how ACUD is completely funded by the budget. Our intention is to get all of the revenue for the system through rates. What we're trying to do, though, is make sure that we balance, as Chairman Satterley said, that we balance reasonable and competitive rates. So without having all of the final, what we call Q of E, final accounting done, we want to make sure that we fully understand all the accounting at the parish level and at the ACUD level to make sure we're capturing the budget correctly. So what I'm trying to say to you is it certainly would be our intention to get everything from rates. But we want to make sure that we understand how all the revenue is going into the utility currently. And we don't fully have that picture fully defined yet.
Okay, so I guess we'll wait to see till we open that box. But,
Okay.
That's my expectation.
Understood. Understood.
Mr. Lawler, did you have anything?
No, I'm going to wait until the presentation in July and August to get the full presentation. I'll have a lot of questions then, I'm sure.
Mr. Joseph.
Thank you.
You mentioned that, we're gonna be quiet for a second, but you said your financial, and you wanted to understand how ACUD 2 function, I mean, if you was in here doing the finance report, you already know we run $1 million deficit every year for the last 20 years. I mean, not a million every year, but I mean, it went from like 500,000 to now to $1 million.
Right.
And that's just what the current customer we have right now. So, I mean, your rate structure is already got to go up.
Well, as we mentioned, we are proposing to go up to starting $55. So there is going to be some going up. But you got to recognize too that we're combining 16,000 new customers with your 3,000 customers, and we also have to look at all the opportunities to optimize costs. And I think one of the best ways that I've heard it articulated was by one of the folks, one of the field guys at AWT. We were having a meeting and someone asked him, well, how do you think you're going to be able to reduce costs? And he said, okay, well, AWT's got about 150 package systems. I think the parish had another 40 or something. That's 200 sites. That's 200 permits. That's 200 compliance obligations. That's 200 places we got to go sample. He said, we're going to have one. I think we're going to be able to do it more efficiently. And so you're right. What we have to do is we have to cover that deficit and still, maintain reasonable rates. But you are right in the sense that, look, if you assume that the static state is to keep the utility running, you want to make a new investment of $200 million. So we obviously need some new money to cover that new investment. And that's why, the key to this is to do it as smartly as possible so that, we maintain that reasonable competitive rate and, we phase it appropriately so that the growth actually, as you say, the growth matches the spend. And so that we take advantage of, as the parish grows, we're bringing more revenue in to cover the future of the expansion.
Okay. And I have one more question.
Go ahead.
You said that you would like to be competitive with the rates of Baton Rouge. I don't know what those rates are, but apparently you do know them.
I could tell you that they're going to be with their current rate schedule, they're going to be about $56, almost $57, I believe, in 2020, and they have a 4% escalator in perpetuity.
And that is flat rate or per 1,000 gallons?
That's the average residential rate, which is, what is that, 400 gallons, William?
Well, the sewer rate is based on water usage.
Okay.
But the average, but if you look at the average residential rate in Baton Rouge, it's going to be about 56 or 57 in
Yeah.
2020.
And when I'm saying that, that's actually the published rate in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge rates are heavily subsidized by a half-cent tax. So, it would actually be significant higher than that if you actually consider the actual rate impact of without the subsidy. But I'm talking about competitive to the published rate of Baton Rouge.
Which the people are seeing, but not really seeing. The
Right.
sales tax.
Well, that's right. That's right. It's also a good example of
I mean,
why.
they don't go buy a good or service in the parish and think about, gee, this much of that went to my sewer bill.
That's right. That's right. And it's, you could look at Shreveport as another example, but it's also a good example why you want to act before the EPA acts for you, because it will be significantly higher.
Mr. Johnson?
I appreciate the information. I'm looking forward to the full report too. I think there's some questions that what you bring out lend to, but obviously, especially with the finances, until you get the full information y'all need, we're not going to know what the final numbers are going to be. But I think it'll be, if you can do it, it'll be intriguing how you get there, because nobody else could.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, before we move along, Terry usually acts as a gatekeeper and asks, and I like when she does it. Being chairman tonight, I'll fill in that role. Would this committee like to hear from, I see Mr. Pertwee from AWT is in the room, Mr. Shaheen, others that are part of the consortium, or is everybody happy with Mr. Baudier's report? Or even you, would you like to say something, Mr. Pertwee? Could you come to the microphone and say that, sir, just for the record? It's, I think the reason Terry does it and I'm doing it too is we need to understand everybody's still getting along. But, of course, we'll know that, as my colleagues to the right said, when we see this next CEA. So would you repeat what you said, sir?
I'm in complete agreement with everything that Jeff has said. The team is working extremely well together, and we're making some really great progress. And I think you're going to be pleased with the outcome. That's my feeling of it.
Mr. Shaheen, did you have something to add?
Did you have to?
Well, he sat down right after he walked forward, so I didn't know if that meant he got a little.
I was waiting for the invite. I fully support what Jeff has provided with you to you tonight. I mean, it's been a fairly significant effort over the last 5 weeks, bringing this information together, updating it from what's happened over the last 5 years, and then generating additional information to try to project what's going to happen over the life of this project, which is a very daunting task and with a lot of calculated assumptions that go into it. So appreciate the opportunity to continue working on it. I've enjoyed working with these folks to bring it to this stage, and hopefully we'll come back to you with a very successful program.
Okay. Don't sit down, Glenn, because you're going to be the next item anyway, so it'll be Mr. Daniel, anybody else from the consortium want to speak this evening, or Mr. Daniel?
I just want to reiterate what I said in the beginning. I'm very pleased with the way this project is going. You know, I couldn't be happier at the cooperation of everybody involved. We've had lots of great meetings. I don't contribute to them. I just want to make that clear. They're doing the engineering, but I'm very impressed with everything that I've seen to date.
Right. Well, that's good. Excellent. All right, so we're going to move along.
Thank
As
you
I
very
said,
much.
Glenn, you can come back. I assume either you or Mr. Heinzel. Next item is item number 9. It's the USDA update from GSA. David, are you going to give that report, or David Heinzel?
Good evening, Council. I think Mr. Daniel provided you with the update in your packet. I'm going to sort of go through each one of those items. There are several different projects in the USDA system project. The first of them being the water distribution rehab project. So on this particular project, the survey's been completed. We've got a meeting scheduled with the surveyor to supplement what he's done thus far with some of the utility maps as well. We've had numerous meetings to find out what the overall budget of the program is going to be for this particular project. Because of what we had discussed with the water plant, we weren't sure if that was going to take away some of the monies. Mr. Daniels assured us that we don't want to take away anything from the water rehab, so it'll remain unaffected. We've also had several different meetings with the Donaldsonville Fire Chief. We're trying to get some additional benefit by improving fire flow within this project. It's a delicate balance because of the fact that USDA funding really doesn't allow you to spend any of this funding on fire flow, but there are a few things that we could do, so we're helping him out with those intended improvements. We're continuing on the project specifications and plans as well. We'll continue further refining those plans, and we anticipate submittal of plans to USDA in November for this particular project. Moving on to the water meter replacement project, we've reviewed several different water meter specs and added those into the contract documents. We actually procured some new aerial photography to help out with the overall plans for this. We've gotten a great deal of the plans already done. We've coordinated with the PUA billing department and GIS department to find out if there were any discrepancies in the overall meter counts. Right now, from that, we found about 77 meters difference. So we're working through those issues with both of them to figure out which ones are missing. We've also compiled a table of addresses, because when we started preparing all these plans, we realized that there were several addresses within the PUA system where meters were not present. So we've had several meetings with GIS, Carl Admiral, William Daniel about this, and we've sent a list of addresses where we noticed some meters were missing. And they're trying to use summer workers and interns to figure out and pick up those meters that we identified that were missing. Project specs are continuing to be assimilated, and this project also, the submittal of the plans is expected for November. Moving on to the water plant, I can continue on with the water plant, but I think y'all probably have discussed that enough. I can go through some of those items, but I think you know what's going on with the overall scope of that. I will say that on the overall schedule, what we're hoping is, USDA actually requires you to bid all the projects together. We're investigating that with USDA to see, since two of these projects will be ready sooner, the water plant will follow up behind because of the lag with the issues they're dealing with. We were hoping that we could potentially bid out the water rehab project and the water meter project ahead of those. So we are investigating that option. Any
Yeah,
questions?
yeah, I'll just say good luck with piecemealing with the USDA. I've,
Right.
in a former life, had a lot of dealings with them with grants and such. I believe, Mr. Dawson, we'll begin with you.
Okay. Yeah, so David, mine are all on the, the PUA
Okay.
replacement project. And specifically on the, fire protection issue. So, been getting a lot of, questions, let's say, lately. And the fire chief has contacted me on several occasions about this. So I'd like to hear, really the USDA loan. I'd like to hear, whether the USDA grant can pay for additional fire protection in the city.
It's not allowed.
Not allowed.
According to USDA, it's not allowed, but there are some improvements that we're doing where we were having to add a couple of hydrants here or there. That could potentially help him out. That's really the only other way that we can help him.
So what about additional, larger line size? That's not, the USDA wouldn't pay for that.
Right, the intent of the USDA grant is to fix and repair water leaks. So it was not to necessarily upsize all lines. With upsizing the lines, you could have additional issues with water quality within the system. So it wasn't intended to provide a full fire flow for the city of Donaldsonville.
Okay. And, so I guess, there is, not everybody is in agreement that that's what should be done. I don't think I'm saying anything that Mr. Daniel and Mr. Shaheen don't already know. But, it seems that the city is under the impression that we should be building a fire system there.
Right. You are correct. We've had those discussions. Where we can help, we'll do what we can, but that is not the
So
overall
what can we do
There
that
are
is
some-
short of upsizing the lines?
That's really the main thing, along with hydrant placement. But we are upsizing some of the lines within our system, so those lines should help him as well. But it wasn't
But
the
those that
overall
we're gonna,
intent.
let me ask you this, David, those that we're gonna upsize, they're not going up to the sizes that, this is a question, I didn't mean to make it a statement, they're not going up to sizes that, the 6 or 8 inch, for example, sizes that, they call for, that they requested in the,
That's
fire
correct.
flow, right?
That's correct. There's only minimal 8-inch.
So we
lines.
might go from, we might upsize a 2-inch line and make it a 3, or
That's correct.
something along those lines, right?
That's correct.
Well, I'm just saying that we administratively are going to have to solve this issue, and somebody needs to communicate to the city of Donaldsonville what the limits are on the grant that we're getting. And, myself, I'm open for improving the fire protection in the city of Donaldsonville.
Right.
However, that we can't use this funding that we have. I think that's pretty much established, and it's my impression that we could actually put the whole grant at risk if we veered from the objective, the stated objective of the grant. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, David. Mr. Shy, yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
he's the chairman.
While Glenn's coming up here, Mr. Daniel, maybe you would take up the challenge that Mr. Dawson just spoke to be sure that the officials in Donaldsonville understand the dilemma that we find ourselves in. And
Well, I had a meeting with the city council of Donaldsonville, and I told them exactly, showed them what size lines we were gonna do. Let me just go back. We had a meeting with the fire chief at the very beginning of this and told him what we were gonna do. And, you know, he was very interested because he was hoping that we could do some stuff. So what we're, like David said, our plan is we're gonna add fire hydrants, and he came to us and he says, well, maybe you can add some fire hydrants in this certain area. And we said we would be happy to work with him. We even asked him to give us a list of things that we thought that we could do, that he thought that we could do to help him with his fire rating. Then I met with the city of Donaldsonville and went over everything, and we had all the lines there. So we've been very transparent in the whole process until just a couple of weeks ago when he came to us and he says, I need 8-inch lines everywhere. And we just can't do that. So, but we're going to look for some other sources of funding to try and help with these projects. But the USDA loan, when we applied, you know, we basically had a plan on how we were going to distribute the water to the residents, the line sizes, the upgrades. They're not going to allow us to go back and do a fire flow project for Donaldsonville. It's for getting water to the residents.
Okay, Mr. Shaheen, you have something to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add to what's already been said, and everybody's right. USDA will not fund strictly a fire flow type protection project. This is for what we call potable water. That's what they fund. Okay. The city is considering an ordinance, but even an ordinance doesn't supersede the funding agency's requirements. I can't go try to meet an ordinance and supersede the funding agency's requirements of providing fire flow. They're not going to do that. Some of the things that we are doing, and William and David are correct. We have had, and Bill I know has also had several meetings with various folks, including the fire chief in Donaldsonville. So we're trying to figure out exactly how we can best help him. There are some things that we are doing that will benefit the city's the water system and fire flow, but it's primarily designed for potable water. Some of the lines are being upsized to 6 and 8 inch diameter lines where we can justify them based on potable water needs, which will also provide fire flows that he currently doesn't have. We're replacing several fire hydrants that have been in the ground, been in the system for 80 years. I don't know how old. I think the system started back in the early 1900s as part of the divestiture of LP&L back in the early 1900s when they owned all the utilities. So there are some things that we're doing. We had another meeting yesterday, which we are working with the fire chief again. There are 3 critical areas. He has a re-rating in 2020, and Bill and I spoke about this today, and we think that there's some marginal areas that he's struggling with in terms of, or the city is, and the fire department is, Fire District 2, I guess it is, struggling with the ratings in some of these areas. But there are 3 critical areas, multi-story buildings that we think, which are in the project area, that we may be able to provide some assistance as a part of this project. Those are some of the things that we're trying to work on with the fire chief and the city. To go back and change this project to, even if we agreed to do this, go back and change out all the line replacements of 6 and 8 inch, it would completely change the scope of the project, which would certainly jeopardize the funding of the USDA funding for the project. So that's not even an option. It's not even an option, not even a consideration.
So I have one other question, that is, somebody could just verify this, that if the project is completed as designed, it will not reduce any of the fire rating, the PIAL rating. And matter of fact, what I'm hearing is that there may be incremental improvements where the fire rating could possibly go down as a result of what we're doing. But certainly, I'd like somebody to say tonight that any of the work that we're doing in that line replacement will not harm the PIAL rating in the city of Donaldsonville.
That's correct. I'll attest to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sounds like everybody's good. David, we thank you for your report. Item number 10 is the PUA, Parish Utilities of Ascension, ACUD number 1 and number 2 financials. I don't know how much we need here. We just talked a good bit about this, I guess, in the Financial Committee report, but Mr. Daniel.
Well, and you talk about them, kind of from 40,000 feet. I'm trying to get down and, looking at the 10-foot view. The problem is I'm having a hard time getting that information out of finance. With their new system, we kind of worked on it. I haven't been able to get it yet, but there is hope. So they sent us some stuff in PDF form. I'm trying to get it put into an Excel spreadsheet so I can sort it out and understand the different categories. I mean, before we switched to the system, I could get every single category and I could see how it compared to the previous month and where we were up and where we were down. I'm having trouble getting it like that, but I was over in Finance's office this afternoon for quite some time, and Jenny worked on it for quite some time. I'm not going to say anything else. We all know how that worked out, though. So, but anyway, I have the exact same finances you have. Now, we're showing that we're down $136,000 year to date, but I think there's some one-time charges in that, so, and it also doesn't reflect the rate increase. So I would think we're actually doing much better than that.
Okay, questions for Mr. Daniel? Doesn't appear that we have any, William, so we thank you for that. Item number, let's see, where are we? 11, I guess it is, yes? The PUA consumption report, Mr. Daniel.
Again, this is just a listing of how many accounts we have, the revenue that we received from those accounts, and how much water that we have sold. So I have it for PUA, and I have it for ACUD number 1.
Questions of Mr. Daniel from the committee? Okay, we'll move right along. Item number 12 is the PUA, monthly leak report. Mr. Daniel.
So the leak report is there for you to look at. We had an employee that we used to be on top of the leaks. Whenever we have a leak, he would go out and work on it. He is transferred to another section of Ascension Parish government. He's actually in the working with drainage in the right-of-ways. So while I still think these are pretty good numbers, Floyd is out there trying to fix leaks. He's not putting these reports together, so now that's kind of tasked to him. So hopefully we'll get that straightened out in the future. But those are the leaks. But I think there's some more leaks that we didn't capture. So and it's not anybody's fault. It's just some of them we didn't know about. I'll discuss that next in the water audit report. We didn't find out about till later.
Questions about leaks?
No, the river's still high, and that's just caused more problems
Yeah.
for the whole area. So
Well,
I mean,
they think they have a leak and it's the river coming out of the levee.
It's supposed to stay above 40 feet till mid.
One heck of a leak, huh, fellas?
so
Last
I don't think we're going to be able to calculate that one.
No.
Okay, so let's see. We'll move on to item number 13, which is the Parish Utilities of Ascension Water Audit Report. Mr. Daniel.
Okay, so we actually, we made a lot of water in May, and we sold a lot of water in May. But you'll also see our unaccounted for water loss is as high as it's been, boy, in a long, long time. And we had some, we were having some pressure problems at B&B RV Park. We weren't, the pressure was kind of going up and kind of going down. We really weren't sure what was going on. We lost as it turns out, we had some, we actually busted some pipes. Pressure got so high. We have resolved the problem now, but we were leaking a lot of water there for a while and we didn't even know it until we busted some of those pipes. So, we also, anyway, that's the main reason that we're having such a high unaccounted for water loss in May. And hopefully if we are able to account for those leaks in June, that number will go down, but it's still a lot of water that did not go to sales that went onto the ground. Whether don't know where it went onto the ground, or we do know where it went on the ground, still gonna have water on the
Is
ground.
that Belina? Is that Belina?
Yes, CJ Bolinas Park.
Any further questions on the water audit report?
Now, I
Mr.
know,
Joseph.
I spoke to you today, and you say there was a valve issue somewhere we didn't know. And if you don't mind, that's the other problem. We have this water system, and we didn't get any maps on where a lot of these valves are and all that. So it's trials and errors when we go through this here. And once again, I have to give it to the employees. They really do a good job, but I mean, they are really looking for some stuff in the dark.
Oh, well, they're not only looking for it in the dark, they're looking for it underground because we didn't even know that valve was there. We got a shovel out and dug it up and found out that it was closed. So what probably happened is the valve doesn't really function anymore, and so it plugs up and then it leaks, and it plugs up and it leaks, and it kind of pretty well plugged up. And we busted pipe that we had to replace, and it was causing problems in the towers and the elevated storage, all because it was a valve that we didn't even know was there. So, and I'm sure that there's a lot of other valves we don't know that there, and we'll find them over time.
We'll replace the lines. We'll find.
And yeah, we're gonna find a lot and replace the lines, but we still have 27 pending work orders for leaks that we haven't even got to yet. So, and as Councilman Joseph pointed out, if there's a lot of digging involved, we can't fix them anyway.
Yeah.
All right, well, number 14 is our year-to-date PUA water audit.
And that's attached, and again, you can just see that the 5 million is way excesses of what we've had in the past.
Okay, any questions on that, gentlemen? Before we call for adjournment, I just, I should have probably took care of this on the chair's additions when I said that there were none. I did see, and I'm sure this committee has seen, as well as all members of the council, an advertisement this week, and not to put you on the spot, Mr. Daniel, but for Utilities Director, is there anything that you'd want to say about that right now?
Yes, sir, and thank you for reminding me. I was going to address that in the director's report. So, I've lost a few people at the utilities, but I was probably understaffed anyway. So,
You reckon?
so I wanted to hire a utility director. Now, the Ascension Sewer people got kind of nervous. They're saying, well, you don't need a utility director. I said, well, yeah, I do. I need one for the water company, and I've got to have someone to interface with Ascension Sewer for a $200 million project. So, and then a $17.5 million project with a water company, and just bringing a lot of, just making sure that a lot of I's get dotted and T's get crossed on other issues. So we advertised for a utility director. We had We have a couple of really good candidates. One that we've actually even interviewed before for a drainage position. He's got a construction management degree, so I think, he's got obviously all the tools to be successful at it. But we did get some other good candidates as well. So hopefully we'll make a decision on that in the next 10 days or so for having, and get a utility director on board. We're also advertising for another administrative assistant. I have to say, Jenny, in all seriousness, she did an incredible job just making sure that we had a committee meeting tonight. So I'm very proud of her for doing that. She worked really hard. And everybody, as Councilman Joseph said, everybody in the utility department works really hard. And if you've been outside with these guys digging up, replacing pipe and everything, it is hot and it's hard work. And they've got my complete and total appreciation and anything that I can do for them to help make their job go better, because they work very, very hard. And also want to put in a plug for our summer employees. We've been really pleased with the work that we've gotten from them. It's a very efficient way to get a lot of work done, and work that we would otherwise be unable to do. We've got them in stormwater. We've got them looking at meters. We've got them working on GIS data. We've got them answering phones in some cases and going through maps and things that we need to digitize and get on in our server. So we've really been able to have good use out of them as well. They're a very talented bunch of kids. Feel lucky to have them as well. I want to thank y'all for helping budget that for the summer. It's a good deal for Ascension Parish, and it's a good deal for them as well.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. I'll just say, as chair, it's been a long time coming, and I'm very pleased to see that we have now advertised for a utilities director. It's not that Mr. Daniel is not a brilliant multitasker as it is, but I think, as he mentioned, with a $225 million sewer project alone, his time is going to become more and more limited. I don't know, William, I don't know how you sleep at night as it is, but I hope you find someone that will work well with you and so forth. And also, don't ever look at your training for production, treatment, and distribution on the water end as something that went in vain. I think that's a very positive thing, and maybe it'd be helpful too in you directing every young man or young woman gets this job.
We're actually requiring that whoever takes the job as utility director get their certifications as well.
That's wonderful. Okay. Any questions about the utility director position? Hearing none, the chair will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Been moved by Councilman Dawson to adjourn. Any objections? Hearing none, we're adjourned.